Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of The Chocolate Life Live. My name is Clay Gordon. I'm your host. I'm your moderator. And today, we're running into a few sort of technical obstacles, not entirely certain what's happened. Raven and I had the opportunity to get online yesterday, do a tech rehearsal and walk through things. And for some reason, we're having audio and video connection challenges this morning. If you're listening to me live, just go into the comments and tell me if you're having any problems hearing me. If you if everything, the audio appears to be okay, please let me know, and we will proceed. Raven is in the middle of restarting her computer, and hopefully she'll be able to log back in, and we'll get her here in just a moment or two. But to get things started, while we're waiting for Raven to connect, remind everybody that, hey, this is the Chocolate Life Live. This is episode number 71. I've been here for a year. Teresa's saying you can hear me. That's good to hear. I'm hoping that it's just some problem sort of out there. It may be that there is because the Mauna Loa is in the middle of erupting, emoting, as Raven told me yesterday. The volcano is emoting. That there's some technical difficulty. I'm not exactly certain what is going on. And, Mark, you say that the audio is a little weak. Sorry to hear that. I'm not doing anything differently at my end. I've got the settings all set up properly. It's, from audio, it's automatic adjustment. I mean, I've got, as near as I know, no changes from last week in terms of what's going on. But in any event, for those of you who are not regulars here, what I'm sharing my screen right now is TheChocolateLife.com. Okay. So it's TheChocolateLife.com. This is the website that is currently live. You can go there and you can find out what's going on in the Chocolate Life. Raven is joined the stream. Hey, Raven, can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Hopefully you can hear me.
I can hear you. Great. Thank you very much.
Hooray. Okay, good.
Hey, so I was wondering if for some reason, there's this, fabulous photo that you shared yesterday on your Instagram, of Mauna Loa exploding. And I was sort of wondering for some reason, something was happening.
You never know on this island for sure.
You never know on the island. Absolutely. So I'm glad that we got all those technical. I was explaining that we had a tech rehearsal yesterday, and and
it was fine,
and it worked perfectly fine yesterday. So I want to say, hey, Raven, welcome to the Chocolate Life. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
And we had this opportunity to speak yesterday, and it occurred to me in leading up to this that number one, we probably haven't spoken personally in 10 years or so since we were on this trip together in Belize, but I didn't understand what your background was before you moved to Hawaii, other than the fact that you were making jewelry in the shape of molecules. So where did the interest from cocoa come from? As I say, you joined this trip with me to Belize in 2010. Why were you on that trip? What did you hope to achieve? Where did this journey begin?
Yeah, I honestly, looking back, I kind of wonder myself. I'm trained as a scientist, and I was in the Bay Area, and I did my postdoc in the Bay Area. And at that point decided I wanted to do science communication rather than science research. So I did a program in science communication. Through that, I ended up making molecule jewelry. At that time, I visited the Scharfenberger factory, which at that point was independent, and tried chocolate for the first time, and also saw a picture of the cacao tree for the first time. And that it kind of took hold of my imagination. And I wasn't really into chocolate when I was younger, except for See's candy, which has influenced me later. But I don't know. I started just thinking about the cacao tree, and I was into botany and stuff like that. And then
can I jump in here really quickly?
Yeah.
So you said you were a scientist, and people will say that physics is everything, but was your focus of study in chemistry? Was your focus study in botany or biology? What did you do your postdoc work on?
Yeah, I was actually my PhD is in molecular biophysics and biochemistry. It's a little bit of everything.
Okay.
Interestingly, I was actually a crystallographer, so I'm back to crystals. And then when I did my postdoc, that was doing this new technique called molecular tweezers. We were looking at single molecules. So I was really interested in basic ways that cells are able to carry on basic processes, and also origin of life research. So
wow.
So that's
quite great. From there to chocolate and cocoa trees. So I still didn't get.
But chocolate is life.
Well, you say that, and yes and no. But one of the things that keeps me interested in what it is that I'm doing is that I have yet to find an aspect of human endeavor that cannot be connected to chocolate in some way. For me, it's making chocolate is about chemistry and physics, right? But there's also this, what is the biology of sensation, which is a part of it. And then you've got the agricultural aspects and the economics and religion and geopolitics and all that kind of stuff. And yes, maybe chocolate is life, right? When you think about it from that perspective. So again, it's going back in history. What got you interested in the first place? I mean, I don't know how you found out about this trip that we took to 2010 in Belize. I don't remember. Do you remember how you found out about it? And
vaguely. Okay. So I've always been a little bit of a health nut, and I became interested in all these articles coming out about how healthy chocolate is as a food. And so I think through that, I knew about Gnosis chocolate. Gotcha. And so I heard about your trip through Vanessa. Gotcha. And it never even occurred to me that you could go and see, cacao being grown and learn from the Maya people who grow and use cacaos. And so I don't know. I just had to go, and I couldn't even explain why at that point. Right. Like, it didn't help. I mean, I was making molecule jewelry. It had nothing to do with my life, but I just had to go.
And working in science communication in addition to making molecule jewelry. So I think that's a really good segue to some of the experiences that we had when we were in Belize. So one of the things that we did one day is, this is our guide, Santiago, and we did a Mayan medicinal walk through the grounds of the Cotton Tree Lodge. And so here we are having a look at a hummingbird's nest that Santiago found for us. And then we have next finding some sort of lizard-like being crouched up in the trees. And this is a heliconia plant. And unbeknownst to us, I mean, heliconia plants can be cut down and you can drink water from the stem, and you can unwrap them and use them as a leaf, like we'd use banana leaves and things like that in cooking. And do you remember visiting the farm of Eladio?
Oh, yes, definitely.
So this is perhaps one of my favorite photos that I've taken anywhere, is seeing the smile on this man's face, and and thinking back about the connection he had to his farm, right? But this shirt saying the rules don't apply to me, very, very much the case. And just, it's a beautiful farm, the Nkuti farm. And from there we went to his family's house and had an opportunity to roast some cacao over a comal. Here it is being crushed, and then it's being winnowed. And here is Kristen, who's using a Corona grain mill to grind the nibs. Did you participate in this process?
Oh, yes. Okay. I remember doing that, yeah.
And the magic bus, this is the bus that we're driving around Southern Belize in the Punta Gorda region, visiting a solar-powered internet cafe. And this is you.
Yes.
You have, this is, you're 12 years younger, but number one, I got to say, great work on the bangs. I'm really liking the way those bangs look. But tell me about the smile on your face, because you appear to be supremely happy. And we can also talk about the circumstances under why we're here planting these trees. So please.
Yeah, this is my first time holding baby cacao trees. And I've just, felt so attracted to the trees, like I mentioned. And we were able that day to plant some seeds. It was our trees. That was our volunteer project. And it was just amazing. And it definitely had a huge impact on me.
And so this is the first trip. So this is before you've moved to Hawaii. This is the first time you've seen cacao trees up close and personal?
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
And you have an opportunity to plant them in the ground. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a special trip. It was a great group of people. We got to, it doesn't look very tall here, but we were, cliff diving over the waterfalls in Rio Blanco. We got a chance to go out to West Snake Key and just relax in the sun. A beautiful day. And then also here's the group at the Mayan ruins at Lubantun in 2010. I want to jump from there. Talk about the jewelry, if you can, really quickly. So did you have a background as a jewelry maker, or did it just come in a fever dream as a result of something you were doing during your science days?
No, the story is that I was undergoing a horrible romantic breakup and wanted to know why I was feeling so terrible. So, of course, as you do, I read a textbook on neurobiology and was just really attracted to the serotonin molecule. And I wanted a serotonin as a symbol to hang around my neck. And I couldn't find anybody who made molecule jewelry. And so I'm like, okay, I'll learn how to make one myself. And I started wearing it around and people said, I want one, I should sell those, or you should sell those. And so I go, okay, I guess I will do that. And it totally took over my life. Yeah.
And for people who are interested, you do have a website called Molecular Muse. Yes. And at Molecular Muse, you can go. So this is a copy of the theobromine molecule.
Yeah.
Right, on a cacao
that picture
tree.
Was taken at the Cotton Tree Lodge. Yeah.
So this is from the 2010 trip.
It is. Yeah.
Cool. And if I can go back to the molecule necklaces, in addition to theobromine and serotonin, bunches of things, dopamine. If you're a chili head, I believe I remember seeing a capsaicin. All sorts of things that can be done. Resveratrol for people. So, for wine lovers who want to geek out and show their love for wine, they can go and do that as well. Very, very cool.
Thank you.
And now I think we're getting into some of your experience working in cacao in Hawaii. So you have land on the Big Island, as I recall. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Right.
Yeah.
And you started off a decade ago. From what you tell me, you moved to Hawaii very shortly after the trip in 2010. You've got a farm. You talked to someone. How hard was it to find material that you could go and start planting on your farm?
This is a great story too. The first month that we were there, I met Tom Sharkey, who you know.
Right.
And I told him about this trip to Belize and how excited I was about cacao. And he handed me a cacao pod and he said, plant this. So within my first month there on the island, I was planting cacao seeds. Yeah.
And how many trees do you have now?
So when we first moved to the island, we were in the Pohoa area. And there was lava on our property in 2014. In 2018, we finally decided to move up to the Hamakua coast. So, and there we kind of had to start from scratch again. And that was, 2018. So now there are 60 trees on our property. Most of them are not fruiting yet. We're just starting to get fruits.
Did you have a plan in terms of your selection? Now, at this point, had you met, so somebody I met when I was in Hawaii in 2005 was a gentleman by the name of Skip Bittenbender, and Skip ran the cacao program at the University of Hawaii. So by this time, had you met skip and were aware of what everybody else was doing on the island?
No, on different islands are pretty separate. So Skip is on Oahu. And so I didn't meet him until I participated in the statewide cacao conference, and then learned about the work he was doing to select different cacao trees to clone to make available to farmers. But he's really done great work.
No, that's true. I mean, Hawaii is one of only 3 states, if we include Puerto Rico, 2 states in 1 territory, in where cacao is grown in the United States, and only 2 of them commercially. And so it's really, really important to have the university contingent at the local level. And I remember visiting in 2005 during a conference. Hawaii Cacao was co-organized, I think, by Pam Williams, who is the founder of TheChocolate. Is this burgeoning Hawaiian cacao community. And one of the things I learned there, and perhaps you know a little bit more about this, is they've been trying to grow cocoa commercially on the island since the 1850s or something like that, and had never figured out a way to, I don't know what the economics are, but for some reason it really didn't take hold until the last decade or so. Is that something you learned more about while you're there?
Just a little bit about it. On our island, Hershey's had a plantation that a lot of the genetics of the cacao that we still grow here come from. Yeah, and I think that one problem is just that the labor costs here, land costs and labor costs, are so high.
Yeah, one of the reasons why, pineapple has left the island for the most part. Sugarcane has left the island. I grew up in Southern California, and C&H. It was the sugar brand, and it was we thought of it as being Hawaiian. I remember being, as a kid in the early 1970s, going to Hawaii and spending time on the island, and going to a pineapple plantation and going to a sugar plantation, and for the most part, all of that is gone. But I think one of the things that's interesting to me is this photo here. Explain to me what's going on here.
This was a demonstration at the University of Hawaii Hilo. We have a germplasm of different clones of cacao varieties there that we keep to make scion available for researcher and farmers. We've also started to graft them. I have had the excellent opportunity to, as a volunteer master gardener, to coordinate the care of this orchard. So here you can see a diversity of pods from different trees from different trees from all over the world. So it's been really fun to get to know those trees.
All of these varieties exist within the clonal garden.
Yes.
And this is on the grounds of the University of Hawaii Hilo.
Yes.
Right. So some of these, I understand, actually have designations which are unique to Hawaii. I think it's UH or HCST or something like that.
Yeah, those are synonyms. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, those are synonyms.
Yeah. And I learned that from reading your book, right?
Wow,
awesome. There's a section on those in the book. And if people go to TheChocolateLife.com right now, what they can do is they can click on this post, and now or afterwards they can actually go and look at this and then expand the image and look at it more closely. And you can read that each one of these pods actually has a name written on it. And I see some of them appear familiar to me. ICS would be the Imperial College selection. So you have a number of ICS varieties, and you have ones which are grown, the UH varieties that we can see. Do you know about how many different varieties you do have?
Oh man, I counted at one point, and now I don't remember. It's a I would say between 20 and 30. Okay.
So what does it feel to be the mistress of cacao, the master of cacao for the collection?
Oh, I love it. It's just amazing. I love being in the orchard, working with those trees. I have people helping me in Master Gardener, and it's fun to send them home with pods and have them make their own tiny fermentations and then come back to me with their nibs or their chocolate that they've made.
Mm-hmm.
It's been an amazing experience.
So let's talk a little bit about that right now. In the decade or so you've been there, how is the cacao community in Hawaii grown? Right. And, some of the cacao growers are also chocolate makers, and some cacao growers, will sell to the chocolate makers on the islands. But how has the cacao community evolved over the course of the last decade?
I have to give a lot of credit to Tom Sharkey, who is seriously the Johnny Appleseed of cacao here. He has, since a little bit before I came to the island and through to today, he gives classes where he will tour his orchard, and you can crack cacao with him, and then he'll just send you home with like 6 plants and say, plant this. The future, the future of cacao is huge in Hawaii. So I did that around 2011. Some of the people who also did that at the same time now have mature orchards from Tom Sharkey's original seeds. And they now are harvesting pods and making their own chocolate. They have visitor tours and have really just taken it in lots of different directions from that original inspiration. When I started, there was Tom Sharkey was making chocolate. There was original Hawaiian chocolate, but I can't think of really any more. And now there are dozens of small makers, and I see more pop up all the time.
So certainly the growth of the small maker, the craft chocolate movement, has been inspired by many people. I mean, I first met Dylan Bigelow in 2012, Dylan is the founder of Manoa Chocolate. And I sold him his first continuous tempering machine back in 2012. And so it's been a real pleasure to see how the community is involved over the course of the last decade. What I want to do is I want to say thanks to Hans, who's connecting here from Panama. Hans, thank you very much for letting us know where you are, and thanks for the expression of support for the work that Raven has been doing. And I want to remind everybody who is watching in real time that there is a comment section. You can go into the live chat in YouTube or the comments in Facebook or LinkedIn, and you can put your questions and comments. We'd love to know where you are connecting in from. And so, yes, Teresa, who's connecting, a regular visitor who's connecting from Atlanta. We have Mark and Yuri who are connecting from Denver. And so it's a pleasure to hear from all of you today. I think, Raven, I think the question for me is more about the community. I mean, in many countries, what we do is we find out that the cocoa growers want to be chocolate makers. And so they end up being, and produce product for commercial sale. And then you have a group of people who just want to be cocoa growers. What's the mix of things that are going on in the island? Do people see cocoa as something they might be able to make a business of going on in the future? Are people growing cocoa because they're chocolate makers? What's the makeup of the island like?
It's a mix of both. Some people have started growing cacao orchard with the intention of selling wet seed to people who will ferment it for them. And then some people start orchards just wanting to take it all the way as well. There are also some chocolate makers who have started their own orchards, but don't have seeds yet. And so they'll get seeds, or they don't have pods yet. So they'll buy beans, dried cocoa beans, either from on island or off island. So there are just so many different models that people have chosen to work with.
Gotcha. Which brings me to this. The reason why we're here today. I want to say that I am the proud owner of number 27 of 50 in the first printing, right? Each one is hand numbered, and as well as I have a nice little dedication in the front. So what was the motivation for this particular book? Right. So
Yeah.
you've been involved for, close to a decade in this, and you've got this different set of experiences. But why this particular book?
So I have been, doing this for a while. I've been bringing chocolate to friends and to Master Gardener, and people go, "Oh my gosh, this is delicious. I want to do this too." And so I've been starting to tutor people on how to do this themselves. And so I was just thinking about, okay, how do I do it? How can other people do it? What are the different methods of doing it? I was able to take a deep dive and experiment with it during the lockdown. And then eventually I'm just like, for people who move here, who are excited about chocolate, there's no consolidated resource for them as a launching off place. I'm not saying that my book has all of the answers or all the ways you might want to do something, but it is a place that people can see what are the steps of the process. Here's a way that I can get started super easily without buying a lot of equipment. And so my motivation is to help people get started in cacao. But then another motivation, since you talked about community, is that I'm really hoping to coalesce a community of small chocolate makers. Let's make the terroir from our backyards, and that as sort of a different model of chocolate making than it has to be a business or it has to be profitable. And when you let go of those ideas, then new possibilities open up that you could not entertain if you needed to be focused on profit. So that.
Which is an interesting thing, which is an interesting sort of way of approaching it. We didn't discuss this aspect of things yesterday. I think, I would describe the world of, craft chocolate making as we do have a group of hobbyists, people who are just in it for the personal exploration, and they end up having chocolate when they're done that they give away to people, and they're not really concerned with, whether it's a business or not. But then you have people who really want to see this as a business. And for me, I think this book, after reading it, my first thought about this book is that it is in fact a very sort of intimate and personal book. I mean, there's a whole lot of this experience that you've had, and you can see the attention to detail which comes from personal experience in putting all this stuff together. And I think that's very different from another book in chocolate making, which would be the How to Make Chocolate book from Dandelion. 3 to 4 years ago. If you just think about the scale that they're talking about, and I'm not talking about scale of production, I'm just thinking, the assumptions that they're coming from. And so I can see this as, number one, is if you are a craft chocolate maker, right, and you are at all interested in expanding your understanding of this, then I think this is a must read for you. I mean, I will say, because of the connection. You talk about community, I immediately felt a part of whatever community you're trying to grow. And there's some nuance here in understanding. I mean, you may never do your own micro ferment, right? But you can talk about micro fermentation, and the information you're going to get from this book is a lot better than any YouTube video I've ever seen on micro ferments. Just throwing that out there. But whether or not you're just going to be a hobbyist and you want to understand this stuff for yourself, but if you are a small batch chocolate maker, I think that the information in this book at some level is going to be help fill in bits and gaps of your knowledge, right? So that when you speak to your customers, you can be more confident in what it is that you're telling them. And that's my take on it. Is it your intent for things?
Absolutely. While my first audience is people in tropical areas who are growing cacao, I also was thinking about, my friends in bean to bar chocolate making on the mainland who are so interested in the process that I'm doing here and what we see and feel and smell here. So definitely, I think that people get something out of it. Also, the photos I put in there, I put in a ton of photos to allow people to feel like they're here, doing it.
Good. So I want to just take a quick step back and reset, and we're about halfway through the hour. We're here on the Chocolate Life Live. My name is Clay Gordon. My guest is Raven Hanna, who has been known as the Molecular Muse, and is also the author of this book, One Cacao Tree. If you're watching live and you have questions, throw them into the chat. We'll get them up onto the screen. If you're watching this or in a replay, you can still throw questions into the comments or in the chat. And what we'll do is we'll get them answered, but not in real time. It will be after the fact when I get notified of what's going on. So I want to say that I do have one bug to pick with the book. It's just,
Okay.
I don't want this arrived, I think, on Saturday. And so I've had a chance to do a very, very high level skim and a deep dive in some of the areas. But, you have a very nice index of recipes. So there are more than 30, there are 30 recipes listed in the index. But these recipes are for some things I would think of as, pretty traditional things that we might think in a chocolate recipe book. But you have also a recipe for bitters, a heart tonic, and a bunch of things that I have never seen before. There's a controversial entry in here, I understand, which is your macadamia nut chocolate cookies. Tell me about those. I mean, I love macadamia nuts.
Yeah. So as we were saying yesterday, so I make these macadamia nut shortbread cookies, which are awesome, gluten-free, vegan, and super delicious. And so I started dipping them in chocolate. And one reason why this combination works so well is that the sort of, they don't have butter, but the butteriness of the cacao mixed with chocolate that is, maybe not as refined, maybe with a little bit more jungly edge, just completely works. It is an amazing combination and nothing you've tasted. And so I've been these are a crowd favorite. I bring them to, friends and potlucks and, master gardener things. And people love these cookies so much. And one of my colleagues was saying, that I should patent the recipe. And I'm like, I'm not going to patent it. I'm going to put it in the book. So anybody can make my famous mac nut cookies.
Right. Not quite patent pending. But I have a question, and this is not the point I was originally making, is what is pa'i? I know that I'm not pronouncing that. I'm thinking
pa'i is
taro.
Right. It's pounded. Yeah, it's pounded taro before any water is added. So when you add water, it becomes poi, which you might be familiar with. It's your traditional. It's like the staple food of the Hawaiian people.
Right.
So so yeah, pa'i is just pounded taro root.
So I jumped into your kulolo crunch recipe.
Yeah.
And it says pa'i, and I'm going, I don't know. Maybe it said somewhere earlier in the.
It does say in the text. There are some Hawaii specific things that I intentionally threw in there, and some Hawaii specific words, because after living here for 12 years, I am a product of this place. The book is a product of this place. It does have universal information, but it also is specific to my experiences here, the terroir of here. Right. And so I purposefully did put in some Hawaii things because of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the language and the translation, all that kind of stuff. Again, this is where this sense of personal intimacy comes from, right? Which I think is the strength of this book. I mean, when I wrote Discover Chocolate back in 2006, 2007, it was, at the time, there were 3 other books that had just been released. So you had the Scharfenberger book, you had Chloe's book, Chocolate Connoisseur, and then you had Mort Rosenblum's book, Bittersweet, A Saga of Light and Dark. And there was a lot of sort of personal narrative and all those things. And so one of the things that I was asked to do is, can you do something which is more evergreen and less personal? Right? Mm-hmm. And had I more experience, right, I would have said, maybe it makes sense to do something which is more personal. And because for me, that's what it is that I really like about the book. And I'm also saying, are you growing jabuticaba on Hawaii?
Oh yeah, it's my favorite. I love it.
It is, you know, I learned about jabuticaba when I was down in Brazil. I was really surprised to see it in Ecuador when I was there last month. I mean, if you've never had a chance to try jabuticaba, you need to go try jabuticaba. It is now my second favorite tropical fruit, and probably my number one favorite fresh tropical fruit going on. So yeah, just everybody.
One of our goals is to grow too much here on our property. We have many, many trees. Yeah.
You know, a jabuticaba marmalade, right? Or using it as a filling inside a bonbon. It's just insane. Just again,
yeah, I make ganache with it.
If anybody is looking for another reason to go to Hawaii, jabuticaba is the reason to go to Hawaii. You don't need anything else. You just need to get off the airplane, point me to the jabuticaba, and it will be great.
I would agree.
Yeah, no. So I'm looking at the back. So there are a bunch of fun recipes, which I really like. You know, got the resources in the back, and my book's not there. I mean, you list the website, but you don't have a copy of my book.
I'm sorry, Clay. I will change that right away. Like I said, I've been completely out of the chocolate world. Yeah. But
do you have a copy? If not, I mean, I'll happy to send
No,
you.
I don't. Yeah.
What? Okay.
I know. Yeah. I know. I've been under a rock. I've been living in the jungle. You'll have to excuse me.
Right. So, you know, absolutely. To the mistress of the Hawaii cacao collection, the master gardener, absolutely. And, you know, sin is probably not the right word, but yes, absolutely. I will arrange to get you a copy of the book, hopefully between now and Christmas. But
and I'm definitely still learning about chocolate. I know that there are many resources that I've missed, and I welcome the opportunity to be educated.
I'm looking at this, and I think you've done a really interesting job. So, for example, not many people know. You know, people might know Michael or Sophie and Michael Coe's books on the true history of chocolate, but aren't familiar with the Cameron McNeil book, you know, Chocolate in Mesoamerica, which, as you may know, has got one of the articles in it was authored by Nat Bletter, who is on the island of Hawaii and was one of the founders of Madre Cacao. Just a small connection there. And then obviously the Stephen Beckett book, but, you know, The Secret Life of Chocolate. I also love the fact that you've got this Wild Food Plants of Hawaii, right? As a way of thinking about it. It's just, I mean, you know, it's, you know, apart from the obvious oversight, I found it to be just really, really a lovely collection of resources here, and resources which, you know, are focused on somebody who's starting out. They're looking to go and, you know, learn more. So they have some experience and they're looking to integrate their knowledge across this entire range of activities, because most chocolate makers only start with beans or nibs. They don't have any understanding whatsoever about micro ferments and things like that. And what I want to do is I want to say, if you go to the Chocolate Life, do the post, what you'll do is you'll find a link right to the Molecular Muse website, and you'll find a link to the website for the book, One Cacao Tree, and you can order this book. And if you haven't already finished all of your holiday shopping needs, I would recommend to everybody that this might be a self-gifting opportunity for everyone who has an interest in this. And wants to know more. And I think that by the creation of the community and the Substack and all the other things you're doing, you know, it's another great resource for people to have. So I think that again, I'm glad. I mean, you know, I first heard about the book a couple of weeks ago when you said, "Hey, Clay, I mean, did you take this photo?" Right?
Yeah.
And I said yes, and immediately gave you permission to use it in the book.
Thank you.
But since, you know, I've been captivated. You know, it's a great resource. But what I want to see if we can jump into, when people think about microferments, it's a little daunting. So this is an example of one kind of ferment. What do people need to know when they think about a micro ferment of cocoa beans?
Yeah, so the story is you need a certain volume of beans in order to allow the microorganisms of the ferments to break down the pulp and cause an increase of temperature. So what people are looking for in fermentation is that the temperature gets up to a certain range to a certain amount of time, which causes changes. It causes enzymes to be released in the beans that causes chemical changes. And so that will be the precursors to the chocolate flavor that is expressed when you roast them. So the main problem we have with tiny ferments is the heat. Now, as small fermenters, we can add external heat. And there are many ways that people have done this. They've put it on top of a refrigerator. You can put it in a sous vide. You can put it in an incubator. The way that I describe in detail in the book is very simple and accessible to everybody, where you put the seeds in a jar. Actually, I have one here that I started the other day.
Okay, let's blow you up really big so that people can see it. Yeah, go.
Okay. So this is a fermentation I started. So this is the beans fresh from the pods, and drain out some of the liquid and put them in the jar with something to inoculate microorganisms. So this has a banana leaf in it. You could also use pieces of pod. Also, I learned on the trip to Belize in 2010 with Clay that you can also suck on the beans, and that will add some microorganisms as well. And then the first few days, you'll see that the yeast start to work. So this one is about 2 days old, and it's very bubbly. So the yeasts are going to work making alcohol. If I open this, I'd smell alcohol. If I taste it, I would taste alcohol. And I do recommend people taste their fermentations. So you'll find that the sweetness of the pulp decreases over the first few days. You'll get a lot more of the sour flavors coming through, and also the alcoholic flavors. So after you put these in the jar, you put them in an incubator or in a cooler. You can just use your regular go to the beach cooler, and put it in with it some hot water bottles. And so every, I don't know, like 3 times a day, maybe change the hot water bottles to keep the temperature up. You start with it at maybe, around 9,500 degrees. And then when you start tasting that it doesn't have the sweetness left over, you bump up the heat to get it into like 120-degree range, so that the seeds die and that the enzymes are released.
So quick question. So because you recommend opening up the jar, right, and tasting, you don't have a fermentation lock on that. So you're not worried about an overpressure because you're going in and releasing that pressure on a regular basis.
In fact, I just put the lid on loosely. I don't put it on tight, but I don't think that the pressure would build up. Some people do on their micro ferments. They like to add sugars in so that the yeasts have more to work on, or even add yeast in. There's so many things you can experiment with. And in that case, if you're not just using cacao pulp, or if you're using some selected yeast, you might have more carbon dioxide pressure buildup. But I haven't had that issue. Yeah.
Right. And one of the things I want to point out is that when you do a fermentation, the primary fermentation, which I prefer over anaerobic, primary fermentation is yeasts converting sugar into alcohol. And then secondary fermentation, which is promoted by the introduction of oxygen into the environment, starts working with the bacteria, primarily lactobacter and acetobacter, to be able to take the alcohol and convert it into acetic acid and heat and things like that. So if you are going to do an inoculant, right, if you do throw yeast into it, you're not doing anything to supplement the lactobacter and the bacterial component of what's going on. And you may unbalance your ferment. I mean, this is one of the things that I've learned as a result of doing this. And so I think, my personal thinking is that adding more material from the local vicinity, which has got the naturally occurring yeasts that are in the air. And this is one of the reasons why people with wooden boxes, fermentation boxes, don't wash their boxes, because they want the bacteria and the yeast which have been absorbed into the surface, or it's why they throw lots of banana leaves into their ferments, is they're inoculating using the natural microbiome. And if you're throwing the same kind of yeast that's used to make bread, then what you're doing is you're actually changing the terroir, because those yeasts are very, very different from the yeasts that would occur naturally in what it is that you're doing. Have you ever put like a little dial thermometer through a hole in the lid so you actually know?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's another thing that you would recommend.
You can get more complicated from there. Yeah.
Right. And I'm kind of wondering, is like, I see a lot of people who are using things like terrarium mats.
Mm-hmm.
So you can use a terrarium mat to provide the heat, and they often have thermostats, and so you can get precise control over temperature. Yes, you can start off very, very simple and geek out in very, very many ways.
Exactly. Yeah.
So tell me, if I can, so here is an experiment in a fermentation that you're working on. What's the experiment here?
So one of the issues that we have with these tiny ferments is that they don't drain the juice very well. When you have the big boxes of seeds, there's a lot of pressure and the juice just drains out of them. But when you just have like a little bit of seeds, the pulp is just happy to stay on them. You don't get a lot of juice draining. But the juice will build up over time as the pulp breaks down. There is a theory that if you have beans sitting in juice, they might be more acidic. I honestly don't know if that's true, but this was an experiment to have the juice drain while it's in the incubator. What I've done is taken a mason jar and put a silicone lid intended for a florist. So it has little holes in the top. And so overturned the jar into a tray to collect the juice and put that whole thing into an incubator so that the juice is just constantly draining. And then, once or twice a day, discard the juice.
Gotcha. And here is, I think, the opposite of that. You have a very, very sloppy ferment. I mean, this doesn't look very attractive.
No.
Should I be worried about that? I'm just, just like looking at
this
this.
This one I think is fine. Honestly, This is an early one. And you had mentioned, I don't see many pictures of fermentations in your Instagram feed. And I'm like, yeah, I generally just put pretty things on the feed. So in the book, there are a lot more photos of fermentation and like how slimy it can be and your hands in the ferment. And if you love fermenting sauerkraut or kombucha, this is totally something that you get a kick out of. But honestly, I don't remember. This was one of the early ones from when I was just starting. And I don't remember this one. If I were to do this now, I would definitely drain the juice. To me, that is too juicy. But yeah, I'm always tweaking things.
And this points out something I think is really important, and I think it may come from your background as a scientist, is that I think a background, right, academic background in science, is that it's important to be an observer, just a close observer. I mean, 10,000 years ago in, the rainforest, being an observer could mean the difference between life and death. And there aren't a whole lot of instances today where, we need to be a very careful observer walking across the road. A busy road is one of them. But when you're doing these sorts of things, paying very, very close attention, and I would imagine you have notebook after notebook after notebook of all of these observations you've done, whether it's on the farm with a tree or it's during a ferment or as you're making chocolate. For you, did that come naturally, or was it because of your academic background, or was it something you needed to learn the habit of doing?
Oh, gosh. I mean, it's so hard to say, right? I mean, I probably went into science because I was interested in how things work and experimenting with things. Certainly, I'm more attracted to the part of science of what we don't know than what we know, you know? And so in some ways, like this tiny fermentation was just this perfect fertile ground for experimentation, because there isn't this set of rules that people say you have to do it a certain way. And that is something that I'm trying to express through this book of just go play, you know, there are not many rules, just have fun. And yes, an observation, of course, is important so that you know what to do next time. Yeah.
Right. And, you know, what I would say is that to the extent that the more you know, the more you can control things. And so, you know, if you do need to tweak, make a change, you know, number one is only change one variable at a time. If you change two variables, you don't know which variable is changing. But so, for example, knowing the sugar level of your pulp could help you gain an understanding of, oh, this is why my ferment is working this way or it's not. Understanding what the pH level of the pulp is going to be, you know, a really good, helpful understanding. Going, you know, it's like, oh, you know, why did this go wrong? Or, you know, I tend to like ferments with high sugar pulp, which result in beans this way. Or I notice that things take longer or shorter times. I mean, for me, you know, that's the way I go, rather than just throwing things into the bowl and mixing them up and finding out what, if I like it or don't. You know, I want to be able to replicate it. But what you're saying here is you don't need to think about replicating it, especially if this is just, you know, for your own exploration and your own interest to understand what is going on. You're not creating necessarily, your desire is not creating a profitable business. You just want to know what kinds of different flavors can I express from my cocoa that I have, and how does fermentation have an influence on all of those things.
And maybe too, being comfortable with not being able to perfectly replicate it every time. So part of the observation is, okay, I did everything the same way, but I'm getting a different flavor or smell from this particular ferment for whatever reasons. It's a different season of the year, right? Or the pods are from different trees, or whatever it is, or the temperature is different.
Or it rained 3 days before harvest last time, and it didn't rain for 2 weeks before harvest this time.
Exactly that. So each time is going to be different. And so to react to it, okay, well, this time this is happening. Maybe I'll keep it fermenting for an extra day, you know, or whatever your reaction is, but just to be aware. Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, I have one idea for a recipe. So if you update this at some point, I have many ideas for recipes, but you're in a position to do something about it. During lockdown, were you one of those people who got into sourdough?
I wasn't, but I have done sourdough in the past. Yeah.
So one of the things you might consider is inoculating the flour with cacao leaves.
Oh, interesting.
So
I
what
love
you want
that
to do
idea.
is you want to overwhelm the naturally occurring yeasts that are in the flour with the yeasts which are on the surface of the
so
leaves from the cacao tree.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So there's a longtime Chocolate Life member. His name is John Malik. He lives in Tennessee or Carolina or someplace like that, who spent some time in Belize, and John recommended this idea. I wasn't able to do that because I didn't have any leaves, but I was able to get my hands on some pods. And what I was able to do is to juice the seeds and use the cacao juice as the liquid when I started up my starter.
Wow,
right?
That's such a great idea.
So,
what happened?
What I noticed is, number one, I use one of these easy ferment. It's like I'm not feeding my sourdough every day. I'm not that into it. So I want to have a very different approach, a lazy approach to it. And there are a bunch of approaches on YouTube you can go. But what I personally found is if I created the biga, right, essentially, did the first before I did the massive addition of the flour, and what I let it do was sit for 2 to 3 days in the refrigerator, and did a long cold ferment. That the sourness that I picked up in the bread, the final bread, was very much reminiscent of what I think of cocoa.
Wow.
Yeah. fermenting. It was really, really lovely. It's not something that everybody would necessarily think about it, but another area of experimentation for you. Perhaps you have a friend who's into sourdough, and you can.
This is going to happen. Yeah,
you can experiment with that, and I would just love to hear. And I think at this point, some of the alternative flours. I mean, this might be something interesting to do with taro, right? Because they do a taro flour, right? They dry it.
Yeah, I don't know. They do breadfruit. Breadfruit would be the one to try with that. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
No. Again, what I want to do is I want to end today letting everybody know that, I love my book, right?
Yay!
It's again, there is this personal intimacy and a connection. From all the different parts that I found very, very attractive. I just enjoyed reading it. There's a lot of technical detail, but it's not overwhelmingly technical. And so if you're looking if you're a chocolate maker and you're looking to reward yourself this holiday season, you can go to this website, onecacaotree.com. Don't worry about noting the link at this point, because if you go to The Chocolate Life and you go to this post, you can scroll down to the bottom and there is a link to purchase the book, and also to go take a look at some of the jewelry that Raven makes based around molecules, including serotonin and theobromine and caffeine, and also anandamide. People who are into the chemistry of cocoa may understand that cacao does have chemicals in it which will reach the anandamide receptors in the brain. So it's a really lovely thing. And that's it for today. I want to thank everybody for joining. I especially want to thank you, Raven. It's been such a pleasure to catch up. I mean, we had this wonderful conversation yesterday, with this, in depth today. And I'm hoping that it's not, another 10 years before we have a chance to chat again. I'm looking forward.
Me too.
I haven't been to Hawaii for cacao since 2005. Is that true? Yeah. No, I haven't been to Hawaii for cacao since 2005. I need to come back sooner rather than later, because there's just been this huge explosion of interest on the island, and some pretty darn good chocolate as well. Is there anything you'd like to end today's?
Well, I would like to thank you wholeheartedly for that trip in 2010 that totally changed my world. And what a joy to talk with you today. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. And for me, if there's one thing I think I am happiest about and proudest about in the work that I've done since 2001, in cocoa and chocolate, is to be able to see the people that I've met and follow the progress that they've made in their own chocolate lives, and the way that in their work, what they've done is they've inspired others to go and find something that they're passionate about and use it as a creative component, as a driving force in their life, to go and make something, fun and new and interesting, which is really important, because regular visitors to the Chocolate Life Live will understand that I sign off every week with, if you're working with chocolate and you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. Thanks, everybody. We'll be back next Tuesday. Hey,